Hey there, boys and girls, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Front Office Playbook. I am your host, Colin Henderson. Joining me today, my esteemed colleagues, Eli Danson and Adam Datema. Boys, we are oh so close to the draft, and things are getting exciting, both in real life and right here at the Front Office Playbook. For those of you out there who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Let me introduce you a little bit here. We at the Front Office Playbook are here to talk through every major move around the NFL with a highlight on the most important position in all of sports, at least in our mind, the general manager. Some can play, some can coach, but few can put together a championship roster. So be sure to hang out with us on all of our social channels as we follow the NFL GM schedule from offseason to draft and from OTAs to kickoff. Coming up on the show today, we're continuing to focus on the upcoming NFL draft, with today's focus on everyone's favorite position to discuss, the quarterback. We're going to break down some of the biggest names in the class, both at the top and bottom of our draft boards. We'll highlight what teams are in the market for a new signal caller and what teams make sense to draft, and we'll discuss how certain teams should game plan around drafting at those positions. GMs can't get this position wrong, so let's make sure we get it right. Let's break down this QB draft class. Adam, why don't you kick us off by giving us a little preview of the 2025 QB draft class and its comparison to recent years and its overall outlook moving forward?
Yeah, overall outlook, there's definitely potential in the class, but let's just start by kind of comparing the top six QBs this year to the six quarterbacks drafted. I think it was in the top 12 last year. Bo Nix was the last at number
Yep.
12 overall. So, essentially every other pick was a quarterback in the top 12. This year, were that to happen, it would not be Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, and Bo Nix. It would be Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milrow, and Will Howard. And that, just hearing it, doesn't sound the same. So many of the quarterbacks from last year you had been hearing about for a few years or had really come onto the scene in the last year. And it's not the same, but there's still talent in this draft. And I think everyone kind of has the consensus number one, Cam Ward. He's almost like the safest pick at quarterback, but also does have a high ceiling. So, if you need a quarterback, low or high floor and potentially a high ceiling as well, that's kind of exactly what you're looking for. So Tennessee at number one, it seems obvious. I think the other night he came out and said, his top four receivers included Calvin Ridley and Treylon Burks, and his top four running backs included Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. So I think this is kind of a done deal. But after that, it seems that people are looking at Shadur as almost the guaranteed number two, but he's not. No one seems to think he's good enough, besides Mel Kiper, who has him as his number one quarterback, number one overall pick. No one else really seems to think that he's good enough to lock down that number two spot. So let's say even if he does barely edge out the others at number two, there is a jumble behind him for those next four spots of the top six. So, it's going to be interesting because everyone has their own opinion. So these teams, they're all going to come up with a different opinion. And depending on, who needs a quarterback, it's going to be interesting to see. There could be really some surprises in this draft just based on the fact that there's no real clarity after Cam Ward and maybe Shadur.
Yeah, I think that's one thing in particular about this class that's unique in comparison to recent draft classes is just simply the lack of conviction across the board of who really is, what is the ranking, what are the QB rankings here. And also in a world where, again, we mentioned six teams of the 32 teams in the NFL, six teams drafted a quarterback inside the top 12 last year. That is six teams that will not be drafting in this class. That means just simply, even after the quarterback carousel has continued to run, not as many opportunities and openings for teams. This is certainly a buyer's market, not a prospects market in terms of the quarterback position. Eli, talk to us about the NFL teams out there that are in the market for a quarterback and who we expect to be most active in this pool come the draft.
Colin, you just mentioned six teams last year. There's really five main teams who are in dire need of an answer at the quarterback position. We'll work back to front in terms of order in the first round of the draft. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, current quarterback room under contract Mason Rudolph, and Skylar Thompson. Since Ben Roethlisberger retired after the 2021 season, they have had Kenny Pickett start 24 games, Mitch Trubisky start 7 games, Mason Rudolph start 3 games, Russ start 11 games, and Justin Fields start 6 games. And this is always the risk in a first-round quarterback, especially towards the back end of the first round. When you miss on a Kenny Pickett, you're set up 3 years later to be in the exact same position you were in 2022. Moving forward, the New Orleans Saints, with the news of Derek Carr's shoulder injury. A coworker of mine from his sources said that Fantasy Points said that the shoulder injury could not have surgery, but Derek might do it just despite the Saints for not trading him this season. And if that's the case and he goes down with a shoulder injury, their starting quarterback is Spencer Rattler, which, as we saw last year, 5th round is generous for how he played last year. Next is the New York Giants, who last year could not get a deal done to move up to take one of the top 3 QBs and took Malik Nabers instead of Michael Penix and Bo Nix. And it's an interesting conversation of, if you could go back last year, would you rather have Michael Penix Jr. or Malik Nabers on your roster? And you look at this quarterback class, you probably say Michael Penix, knowing the promise that he showed last year. So they're planning on starting Russ on a 1-year deal, and they have Jameis as a backup on a 2-year, $8 million deal. So they have a short-term starter right now. Long-term answer is desperate. And then the Cleveland Browns, which is by far and away the most desperate situation the team is in. So Deshaun Watson has an $80.7 million cap hit next year. He already has 3 board years on the deal. It's $131 million in dead cap if he's cut. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting, the place that organization is in. And with him having another Achilles injury in the offseason, after he already tore it in season, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett are battling for starting quarterback reps right now. And then the last team, pick number 1, is the Tennessee Titans. And they have Will Levis, who was a 2nd-round pick 2 years ago, who became the meme of the season for the NFL and was just the most inefficient wild quarterback in the league last year. And Brandon Allen they brought in as a backup. So those 5 teams in particular are really going to dictate the cadence and the rhythm of the draft this year with where they take their quarterback.
Outside of those top 5, which I think we'd all agree are just in dire straits for even I hesitate to use the word dire straits because even a team like the Giants, it's not, quote, dire straits. They have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. One of them has won a Super Bowl, but the lack of a forward-thinking future project, the lack of a franchise quarterback, which every GM is searching for. All 5 of those teams looking for it. The Titans, the only one with the ball in their hands to be able to actually get the guy that they want without having to move anywhere. Obviously, there are more than 5 quarterbacks who are going to get drafted this year. Eli, what teams out there are not so much in dire straits for a quarterback, but certainly are going to be expected to draft somebody in this class?
Yeah, there are a couple teams I think have some interesting QB situations that are generally forward-looking teams to begin with. Not this first one. The New York Jets signed Justin Fields to a contract, a 2-year, $40 million deal this offseason. And if you are counting on him to be your future starter, it's not something he's proven that he can do in the league. And so the Jets would be a team round 2, round 3, where taking a quarterback in that kind of same Jalen Hurts, not the specific quarterback, but the idea of taking a 2nd-round QB to come in and compete and potentially being your starter would make a lot of sense. And then 3 teams, the Rams. Stafford is not a young chicken, and they have no developmental piece behind him. A 3rd, 4th-round QB would make a lot of sense. Minnesota, JJ is coming off of a knee injury and has not proven anything in the league. And they have no established backup. So if he's not the answer, and now your room is barren, that's a bad place to be. They don't really have the draft capital to address it this draft, if we be honest. And then the Raiders just signed Geno to a 2-year contract. They have an easy out after 2 years, 0 dead cap hit if they release him in 2027. And so he comes in with Pete Carroll, and they establish the culture and bring in a young quarterback to develop for 2-3 years behind him would make a lot of sense. If Geno is not the answer they want him to be, even though they're in the building, they love him. They think he's their starting for the next 5, 6 years.
So Eli, for the Raiders, would you expect them to use the number 6 pick on it or second round or later on it?
Yeah, great question. I would expect them to use a third, fourth round pick on a developmental QB behind them. Would be a great room to develop in, especially with the career that Gino has had to battle through and the resilience he has had. Teaching those skills and mental aspect of the game to a young QB would just be a great long-term developmental view for your roster.
I'd also imagine a world where the Raiders didn't hire Pete Carroll at his age for a developmental project initially, at least initially here. Spending a first round pick at number 6 overall. This is a team that they want to start winning games. That's the reason why they got Gino, because the quarterback play was so bad last year. I'd imagine that they have much more important needs at number 6 than going for somebody who could replace Gino in a year or two. At least that would be my mindset when it comes to the Raiders here. Again, the Pete Carroll signing signaled to me like they're tired of being bad and they want to be good for a second here before they start looking at like what the future holds.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for Raiders.
Adam, yeah. Well, again, Sense and Raiders don't always make, that's not always a pairing in
It's
this
just my
world.
time.
So,
Tom
Brady's
Brady's
there now.
in. It's time.
well, you know what? Everyone loves to say this. And I don't get me wrong. I hope Tom Brady and for the good people of Raider Nation, it all works out for them. But we have seen plenty of stars come in and have a little bit more of a struggle when it comes to owning a team or managing a team or running a team as GM. Those are not always compatible skill traits. Let's talk about who we think is the most skilled player in this draft, or at least at the quarterback position here.
Yeah.
We have Cam Ward all but assured going pick number 1. Adam, you kind of already touched a little bit of a scouting report on him. Go a little bit more in depth on Cam Ward. I mean, I think the floor, like you mentioned before, the floor is really high on him. I think that's the reason why this feels like the safest number 1 overall pick to kind of pick out there from this group. The ceiling seems high. It's maybe not as high as some of the names we've mentioned that were drafted over the last few years, but he certainly seems like an NFL starting quarterback. Kind of break the tape down a little bit more for Cam Ward.
Yeah, again, that high floor kind of comes from just a consistent accuracy, clear that he has the arm strength to make it in the NFL. He's not making a lot of mistakes. And then the high ceiling comes from the fact that, he's not Lamar Jackson out there, but he's got a little Patrick Mahomes in him. He's got some mobility. He's got some creativity. And so if that can be honed for a team, then that can be very good. Now, the Titans, they kind of seemed like they were building for, Will Levis last year. They were like, we're going to put some veteran receivers in there for you. We're going to get some running backs for you. Honestly, I forget if they did anything with the O-line, but maybe some of that left over can help Cam Ward. But Cam Ward alone is not good enough to kind of overcome the Titans deficiencies from last year. They're going to have to kind of redo that attempt last year that they made with some of the older guys. And if Emeka Egbuka is there in the second round, and Titans do have a second round pick, right? I just want to confirm that. But really, they need another receiving option in the second round if they are going to help Cam Ward to a point where he can actually be competitive and develop. Again, he's not someone who's going to come in and change your program immediately. He's going to be able to operate the offense and make some off-schedule plays, but he doesn't seem to be elite in any way that's going to just come in and change your team. So you do still need to make sure you're building around Cam Ward, assuming you draft him in the first round. We can't say, okay, we got the quarterback and we got some offensive weapons last year. Now let's focus on the defense. No, it's probably going to take another 1 or 2 high to mid round picks to make sure that offense is in a place where Cam Ward can use it going forward this year.
As we look at the class, we mentioned the draft class last year. I mean, you've done plenty of scouting on the draft class last year. You've done scouting on Cam Ward. Where would Cam Ward rank in a pre-draft ranking for the QB rankings if he was in last year's draft? If he was competing against those 6 guys we mentioned that were drafted inside the top 12, where would you have him in this?
Me personally, I mean, clearly Sean Payton loves Bo Nix. I would have had Cam Ward over Bo Nix. I probably would have had him over Penix, and then JJ. Yeah, Cam Ward for me would have been right in that Drake May range. I don't think I would have seen enough from JJ. He just was pretty limited in the offense, and Cam Ward really transformed that Miami offense
For sure.
when he was playing there. So he would have been in the conversation with Drake May for number 3. I would really have to dive into the tape to differentiate, but I don't think he would have eclipsed Caleb or Jaden.
Eli?
Yeah, for me, is a clear tier below the top 3 guys, Jaden, Drake, and Caleb last year, and a couple tiers higher than Penix, Bo Nix, and JJ. I didn't think any of those guys were first-round talents at the quarterback position. JJ, Penix, and Bo Nix. Cam Ward, to me, it's clear he is a first-round talent at quarterback. Drake, Jaden, and Caleb each had unique traits that had high elite ceiling potential in the NFL. Cam doesn't have that specific trait to me, but he, like Adam mentioned, is consistent across the board in his accuracy and his arm talent and his ball placement and his athleticism on the field. It's in the size that he has. It's clear that he's a first round. The specific thing about Cam that I think will translate most to the NFL field is that the game moves really slow for him. It is clear when you watch the tape that he is in control of the offense, that he understands what the defense is trying to do to him, and the game moves at his speed. When you watch a guy like Jackson Dart, who we'll get later to, it looks like the defense can dictate some of the pace at which he plays, and the game is always moving at Cam. When Cam wants to scramble, Cam scrambles. When Cam wants to wait in the pocket and make the throw, that's what he does. I think that is the best trait that he has. What concerns me about him translating to the NFL field is Patrick Mahomes has this insane ability to always be just fast enough to get away from the defender and to just get the first down. And my concern is that Cam relies on his athleticism, but it is a step slow. And it'll be just on the other side of the coin flip where that shoestring tackle that Mahomes escapes from will get Cam Ward. The yard that Patrick Mahomes is able to get, Cam Ward will be a yard short. That is kind of the one concern I have. He moves kind of like Jordan Love on the field. He's not twitchy. His cadence is not fast with his feet, but he makes it work because he's just a better athlete than the guys on the college field. On the NFL field, I'm not sure how that translates.
Yeah, so just to touch on that, you touched on 2 things that watching these quarterbacks, it's really tough to nail down, and that's the control they have of the offense and then the creativity they have within the offense. And that's one thing where, it really did separate the quarterbacks in this class for me, who had control of the offense consistently and who didn't. And then the creativity, I think I may be giving Cam Ward a little more credit for his ceiling than you are. You're saying I haven't seen him do it in college yet. I'm saying he's creative. I think he can figure it out how to be creative in the NFL as well. So, that's one thing that's very annoying about assessing these quarterbacks is ultimately so much of it is going to be the mental, and you can get a lot of it from the tape, but to figure out how that question is going to be answered, you got to be in the room with them, talking to them, and just really getting to know the guy.
From the GM lens, you scout a guy of this talent, and you are assured to take him number 1. You take the quarterback. It is the most valuable position on the field. He has the talent to be an above average quarterback. Would you love him to have the ceiling of Drake May or Caleb Williams? Absolutely. But you're picking at 1 this year. You don't have a quarterback. You have the potential to solve the most important position on the field. You don't mess around with that. You take the guy, and that is good general managing. You have the answer at quarterback, and now you can build around him. Sets you up for success down the line. It makes sense to take Cam. He is that good.
Also, Cam Ward, dude is an athlete. Like, dude can move around. Like, I totally, to your point, Eli, I understand everything that you're saying, but I think I've watched enough tape of Cam Ward where I feel like he has a little bit of that dog in him that, like, I will get that extra yard. Like, I will find a way of getting there. I will kind of move this stuff. I appreciated there was a couple tape, one against Florida State I believe, last year, where he just trucked over a linebacker but it was a 3rd and 1 and needed that 1 yard and got there. That was just, again, I remember it stuck in my mind and I went back and watched the tape of it again before this episode. Just something that I think we don't sometimes respect him enough coming out of that. I think he has that ability to go rise his game to another level. I just hope Tennessee is the right place for that to occur. We hoped Will Levis was going to be something coming out of Kentucky, and that turned into, one of the more maddening quarterback situations out there. So I'd like to see Cam Ward now, new GM, new head coach, starting a new system. Like, let's see where this goes. Very hopeful for him there. Speaking of athleticism, let's talk about one of the, a guy who loves to talk about his athleticism and is one of the more unique quarterback prospects to ever come out of the NFL draft for the absolute maddening or wide range of takes out of him, Mr. Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. Again, Adam, I'll just kick you off. If you're listening to this podcast, you know who Shedeur Sanders is. We don't need to get into the backstory here, but just tell me about when you're looking at the tape, when you're scouting him, how does he look? If you project that he's going to go from the Big 12 to the NFL in terms of talent.
He is an accurate quarterback from the pocket.
What a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, I was going to say, boy.
I don't think he's a first-round talent. I don't think the arm strength is there to say, we got to get him. Quarterbacks have shown to be able to improve arm strength with improved technique. Once they get in the league, he's going to need to improve it. But honestly, his technique looks really good. It looks like he's kind of a high-effort thrower, which concerns me when I see that it looks like he's trying hard to throw it and he has good technique already and the arm strength is still a question. So those two things can together make me kind of think that the arm strength might not be able to get solved, but he also is a very quick processor. That was a very good thing I saw about him, that more than almost any of the other quarterbacks I watched, he was able to get it out fast. And I know that was also a function of the offense. They had a lot of bubble screens and quick slants and such, but looking at these other quarterbacks, they threw a lot of bubble screens and quick slants, and that's those types of routes too. Like, they weren't getting it out as fast. And again, he's a very accurate quarterback from the pocket. So these balls are generally hitting receivers in stride, nice catchable balls that they're able to do something with. And not every quarterback in this draft can say that, but the other quarterbacks generally have better arm strength, generally are more mobile. And there's not a huge amount of incredibly mobile guys this year, honestly, but they're all kind of around Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't stand out for sure in terms of athleticism. So, again, it's going to come down to, do you trust that he's going to translate that processing speed that he has into a consistent, once he has an offensive line in front of him, because, oh my God, the offensive line really did get to him. You could tell when he would go off his first read, his feet would start getting a little jittery. And, you kind of can't blame him for it, because he's used to, as soon as he's past one read, getting rocked. The O-line did get better in his second year there, but it goes back to, overall, he didn't seem to have control of the offense. Even with all of those short routes and stuff built in, it seemed like he was just running the offense, not controlling the offense. And, when I think of a first-round NFL quarterback, I'm thinking of a guy who's going to walk up to the line, know exactly, not exactly as a rookie, of course, but, understand what the defense is trying to do to you, get the ball out fast like Shedeur, but, he took, 50-something sacks last year, and I don't know, 13, 14 games. It's a lot. And he's clearly not controlling it to the point where the defense can't affect him. He's not insulating himself from whatever the defense is doing. And, there were two other quarterbacks I saw in this draft class that were doing that. First round talent, I'm not sure, but definitely in the second round, if you need a quarterback, take a shot.
I can't fathom a world that he's going to fall to the second here. Eli, kind of talk me through your take on Shedeur here.
The truth about quarterbacks in the NFL is, if a team thinks that they can start for them, they're a first-round quarterback. We can kind of throw out that talent level. If a team believes they're a first-round if they can start for the team, they see him as a potential starting quarterback, teams take him in the first round. Going back to 2018, first round quarterbacks, Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins. Talk about the ones that didn't work, right? Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, Anthony Richardson, up for debate. But you look at these quarterbacks and their talent level coming out of college and compare it to the ceiling that Shedeur Sanders has. I would argue Shedeur has a higher ceiling than pretty much all those quarterbacks listed. He's accurate. He's been playing the position for a long time. He's got good feet in the pocket when he does have time, as Adam alluded to. His athleticism is subpar. If you could have the career of Teddy Bridgewater, if he didn't blow out his knee, would you spend a first round pick on that quarterback? The answer is yes. You would spend a first round quarterback on an average level top 16 starter in the league, which is where right about I think Shedeur's ceiling is. Are you spending a top 3 pick on that player? No, but certainly trading back up into the first round to take a player like that makes a lot of sense. You get the extra year of team control with the 5th-year extension. And I just, I see him and I think Andy Dalton. I think Tua. I think, Teddy. These quarterbacks who know how to play the position. They don't have the physical skill set to elevate the offense around them. I don't love the term elevate the skill talent around them because the skill talent is the level that they have. But can you elevate the system? Can you elevate the offense? I don't think he's at that level. But if he's with an offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson, who turned Jared Goff into a top 7 quarterback, Shedeur certainly has that IQ and ability on the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think he can make every throw. I think that's one of the things that I've just seen jump off the tape. He makes every throw. He completes 70% of his passes. He's incredibly accurate. To your point, I agree. He holds onto the ball too long. He takes unnecessary sacks. Yes, I can attribute some of that to him having an terrible offensive line at Colorado. I can also attribute that to him just trying to do too much with the ball, which happens very often in the college ranks. Of course, that also happens in the NFL, and usually guys don't live very long if they're going to continue to take hits quite that much. Talked to Caleb Williams after his record-breaking number of sacks last year as a rookie, as a prime example of what can happen when you hold on to the ball too long. One thing about Shedeur Sanders that I find very interesting, I mean, you guys are talking, I think, slightly unrealistic with the number of teams that are currently looking for a quarterback. I mean, yes, if he gets past the Saints at 9, it could be a longer wait for him to, say, Pittsburgh at 21 or, the Rams, if the Rams, I believe, at 25, who could be sitting there. Like, yes, he could fall to those spots, but more than likely, I think the Saints make a lot of sense for him at 9. And one of the things that I kind of like about this is, I could see Shedeur having a Drew Brees-esque kind of, maybe not obviously to Hall of Fame levels, but in terms of just his playing style of just, hey, if you're in the right offensive system of see throw, make throw, of not being asked to do a lot in the backfield, not being asked to, orchestrate an offense from start to finish, but basically being just told to make your throws. We just watched Sean Payton do what he did with Drew Brees with Bo Nix in year 1. Essentially a similar type of player that I would kind of compare these two guys at, who the athleticism's not overwhelming. It's not crazy, but you know what? They make every throw and they look like a guy who looks like an NFL quarterback. So I think 9 to the Saints makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't expect him to fall past 21 to Pittsburgh here. If you want Shedeur Sanders and he falls past the Saints, expect to have to move up to go grab him, because I just don't expect him to fall past 21. One other thing I wanted to mention about him real quick, and I wanted to ask you guys your opinions on this from a GM's perspective. Shedeur Sanders was coached by his father in high school. He was coached by his father at Jackson State. He was coached by his father at Colorado. Would you, as a GM, and obviously we are not having conversations with him, we're not getting into the head of this man, and I'm not pretending that we can, but I'm saying, would you have any hesitation, or how would you handle the idea of, well, yes, obviously I'm the head coach, I'm the GM, we're going to be drafting him to our team, he's going to be working for us and in our system. How do you handle the idea that, like, he won't have his dad with him, he won't have his dad coaching him for the first time in 8 years at least? And potentially his entire life, because I have to assume Deion's doing some Pop Warner coaching in his days as well.
Yeah, if I'm a GM, I think the way I'm looking at the dad angle is that this quarterback prospect has had every single resource put towards his success possible for as long as anyone could have in their football career. So if there are fixable issues that I see that haven't been fixed after, Shedeur and Tom Brady are kind of tight, he's been working out with, the best quarterback coaches. He's had a dad who's coached his teams in college with him as the quarterback, designing an offense where we're trying to get you as many completions to your athletes as possible. So many of his touchdowns are on long catch and runs, and not a lot come from within the red zone. Basically, this is the way I was watching the film. Was it seems like he has been very, very set up for success, with the exception of the offensive line, pretty much. And he has done a good job with those tools that he's been given. So for me, it's not as much the dad thing. I think he's going to be able to separate from the familial thing. I think especially Deion, he's going to be coaching a college team while his kid's in the NFL. Like there's just a lot of logistical conflicts to dad being involved constantly.
And I think in general, I'm not so much talking about Deion being Deion. Notice I didn't mention Deion in the conversation. I more mean just the idea of, if for the first time ever, this kid is going to, well, first time in at least 8 years, if not ever, he's going to be playing under not his father. I think that is at least somewhat fascinating of a conversation when teams are essentially, as we know, if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, essentially you're giving him 3 years. You're handing the franchise to him for 3 years.
I'm not worried about it because I don't think Deion is the type of father to baby his son in terms of like emotional.
I certainly don't think that.
Yeah. No, I think
certainly
we've
don't
all
think
seen Deion. We don't expect that out of him. But I think Deion is the type of father to give his son everything he needs to be successful. So that's where the familial thing comes into play for me. Like the father has given him everything he needs, and he's done pretty well with it. But can he do stuff without it? And so I don't think it's going to be an issue without the emotional connection to Deion.
Eli, if you took, I mean, again, not so much the emotion, but as a GM, I know you are a little lower on Shedeur than most, but I'm going to use the Saints at number 9, because again, I think it makes a ton of sense for that spot. If you were the Saints at number 9 and you're sitting there as the GM for the Saints, does any of that give you any type of pause?
It gives me no pause whatsoever, specifically because Shedeur was the face of the Colorado team for 2 seasons, with the entire media world fixated on him, and handled it with aplomb. Was a star student, was a star citizen, represented the university with class and respect. And doing that with the entire world looking at you, knowing that Deion is your father, he handled that incredibly well. So he can come in and be the face of our franchise. The media responsibilities, the volunteer time, the exposure that the quarterbacks in the NFL face, I would have full confidence that Deion Sanders, prime time, raised his son to be able to handle that responsibility and handle being without dad, right? Understanding that I've prepared you for this moment. Fly free, my son. It is your time. I have full confidence Shedeur could run the franchise without his father being there. Full confidence. It would not affect my decision whatsoever.
Yeah, and I certainly could not agree more with you. I don't think there's ever been a quarterback who's been under, or I mean, there certainly has been other ones that I can think of now, but like in recent memory of having the entire media world down your throat for your final 2 years. Certainly believe he is an upstanding kid who is ready to take on a team and can be the face of a franchise. I have no doubt about that. I am still very curious about what he's going to be when he acts to be coached by someone who he's not related to. It's going to be fun to watch one way or the other. I just hope it works out for him wherever he lands. Let's move on to the next. All right. So those 2 guys have kind of been consistently discussed as the QB 1s and 2s. I want to open the conversation up a little bit now so we can talk about a lot more quarterbacks. Rapid fire quiz. Adam, who is your QB3?
My QB3 is Jalen Milroe. My QB2 is Tyler Shough.
Okay, well then technically, all right. So after those 2, then let's talk about Tyler Shough then.
Let's talk about Tyler Shough. All right, let's talk about
Eli,
Tyler
who's
Shough.
your QB?
QB3 is Jalen, is Shedeur.
Okay, so all right, so both of you have Shador as not as QB2 as most consensus people have. All right, so who do you have as QB2 then?
I have Jalen Milroe as
All
my
right, so
QB.
you know what, Eli, you take Jalen. Adam, you take Shuck. Why don't we talk about both of these guys and essentially argue why you believe that that quarterback is QB?
Go for Jalen.
Okay, so if you watch the first half of the Georgia tape, it is the best a quarterback played all season against any team. It was spectacular. He made every throw on the field, athletically was unstoppable. That Georgia defense, which is full of NFL players, could not stop him. He was amazing. I understand he fell apart at the end of this season. If you look at the progress he made when he started last year, where he could not play on the college football field to start 2 seasons ago. He got benched at Alabama because he was that bad. And he worked his butt off and developed as a quarterback. We know the level of athlete that he is. He's a 4.3 athlete on the field with mobility and power, but he developed his skills as a passer. Now, he was throwing to some excellent players and had the infrastructure around him at Alabama. I mean, he would toss it up to Ryan Williams and he would just do insane things on the field. But looking at what is the ceiling of all of these quarterbacks, and he has the highest ceiling out of anybody in the class. Is he as polished as Cam? No, and that's why he's not my number one quarterback. But when you look at the growth he made from year 1 to year 2 as a college football starter and the trajectory of his talent, he's young, he has the athleticism. I'm going to bet on that growth continuing on. Every Alabama reporter and coach and media person talked about what an outstanding individual he is and leader of the locker room. So he is bringing everything you want in a modern NFL quarterback. The only thing that he's missing right now is consistency and decision making. And those are two things that improve in your time as a starter when you just get the reps on the field. But he has ball placement, he has the arm talent, and he has the athleticism to be a Pro Bowl quarterback in the league and a top 5 talent.
I think if he finds I completely agree with you. I think if he finds the right landing spot where he's not asked to step onto the field anytime soon, where he can be a project with the right coaching staff and the right project. I agree. I think you could coach ideally a lot of the current issues with him and improve that quite a bit over the next few years. Adam, tell me about Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, I want to touch on Milroe real quick because I do have him as my number 3. So I like him a lot, and I have no problem with him being ranked high. The only thing with Milroe that kept me from putting him number 2 was it just seemed like they kind of limited the offense for him. A lot of his throws were slants and curls, and there were a few others, and he made a lot of explosive plays running. But despite the limited offense, he operated it with precision. So whatever they were asking him to do, he did it as well as they could have expected. So there's no reason to knock him for the limited offense. It just is preventing me from putting him a little higher because I haven't seen it yet. So, and I haven't been in the room. I know he won the academic Heisman, so should be a smart guy, but it's just tough to kind of extrapolate those things from the film. Tyler Shuck, it's interesting when you watch different prospects, regardless of position, because some notes just come to you easier than others. And with Tyler Shuck, this was such an easy one. And I was so pleasantly surprised. This man just came out there and just zip, 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 drop back, efficient footwork, real sharp, didn't seem to have any waste steps, zip the ball as soon as he hits that back step, right in the perfect placement for his receiver. He's hitting guys on shallow crossers, he's hitting out routes, he's hitting whatever it is. He's hitting everyone all over the field right on time consistently. I don't know. He's my number 2 quarterback because besides Cam Ward's ceiling and a little more ability to create, I don't know that I could really ask for better tape out of a quarterback. This guy, even as a scrambler, he's solid. And one thing that after I was watching it for a bit, that I started not constantly thinking, but kind of kept popping up when he would do certain things. He moves like Aaron Rodgers for a lot of his moves. Some of his throwing motions and a little bit of his scrambling really does look like Rodgers. And he's got the arm, he's got the accuracy, seems like he's got the timing down. And I know he's old, but I think you could bring him in and he's your day one starter if you need a quarterback as a team. I really like the tools, and everything I saw from the tape showed me that he's got the mental ability to operate an offense at a high level. So, and not just, throw the ball to a spot the receiver's going to be there. No, the receiver's got a DB draped all over him. He's putting it down in a way like, there was a corner route that he ran, and that, not he ran, the receiver ran, and he throws the ball. And I'm watching this on my iPad and I'm like, oh God, it slips by this DB right into the receiver's hands, right on the sideline. And, I got excited watching it. Like, this happens over and over again. Tyler Shough, he seems like a pro quarterback already. And I know, again, the age thing, but day one starter.
I gotta say, I watched his tape. I happen to disagree with you a little bit on this front. I mean, first off, I think it does matter that came out of the same high school class as Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. I mean, just to put an age rate. What's that?
Why does that matter, though?
Just to put an age range out there in terms of where those guys have been playing NFL football for multiple years, you're drafting a guy who's going to turn 26 before opening day. I think there's something to be said about that, especially as someone who has fine production in college, but nothing crazy. He's had three injuries. He's had 3 injury, kind of riddled seasons that he's come through. So he's coming with some injury history. It just seems like these are too many questions. I also don't particularly love his deep ball. You might have just talked about it, but I didn't love it in terms of a general, consistent, especially now when comparing amongst other quarterbacks in this class. And really, I mentioned before, the injury history really scares me on this front. I think this is a player that if you want to talk about QB2 or QB3 that you're trying to put him in here, I think he's much lower on my list than that. There's too many question marks for me. Eli, what are your thoughts?
Can I respond to
of course, please.
Yeah, so the injury history, that's tough to kind of judge, from our standpoint. If your team doctors are saying it's going to be an issue, yeah, that's an issue. But just watching TV and looking on Twitter, I haven't seen a consistent the injury is really an issue for Tyler Shough. So for me, in my mind, that didn't really that wasn't an issue for me. I also think that, obviously plays into why he is older. He had those injury years. He was behind Justin Herbert at Oregon. Tough to fault someone for that. So the older thing doesn't really bug me so much, especially when, we're seeing quarterbacks regularly, the good ones play till 40. So, and then I think one more point you made was his deep ball. I remember at least couple deep balls where his receivers did, in my opinion, let him down. I think I'm remembering at least one just blatant drop, and then maybe a couple other tough ones. But I stand by my Shough praise. I'm sticking with it. I think he's a first round talent. Draft him to be your starter. Eli?
Yeah, I just don't agree at all. I think he has a slow release. He does have prototypical size and force, athleticism. Yeah, I think the length of his release is pretty slow. I think when he has to throw the deep ball, he really has to rack into it and let go, not in a way that's smooth or translatable. I think the 26-year-old part is a massive red flag. You're talking about we're right about the ceiling of him as a quarterback coming into the league. And if you are a pretty good college quarterback and you're already near your ceiling, no thank you. I am not touching that anywhere near the first round as a general manager. You're drafting these QBs to be top talents in the league, and a pretty good college quarterback is nowhere close to a top half talent on the NFL field. You have to develop quite a bit. For those reasons, he just reminded me of Davis Mills, just on the field, just a tall quarterback with a pretty good arm. Now, one thing that he is really good at, and I was listening to a few other people talk about him, is he's an amazing sack avoider at the QB position, which in the modern NFL is incredibly important and a plus for him. But I'm just not touching a 26-year-old quarterback in the first round. No way whatsoever as a GM. I think that's incredibly irresponsible. By the end of his rookie contract, he's 31 years old. And you say that quarterbacks play until they're 40. We've had 3 of them do that. And
we've had backups do that.
Okay, I don't want a backup in the first round. That's totally fine.
I'm just saying, if
They can
There's a
exist in the
difference.
NFL for a while.
Yeah,
Sure,
there's
but
a difference between like a starter who's no longer a starter at 36 and decides to call it a career when he could be a backup for a few more years and still play. Like, and you know, if that's Tyler Shuck's
Let's
career, he's a starter for 10 years and then a backup for a few years. Like, that's not a bad career. And
sure.
you,
That's
you
if he's
said
a
you
starter.
were
If he's a
drafting,
starter from 26 to 36, then yes, that's a
and
perfectly
you said
fine
you
career
were
if he does
drafting
that.
quarterbacks in the first round who you thought could be average starters in the NFL. I think Tyler Shuck walks in, and it was surprising that you said that you thought his release wasn't good. I thought he got the ball out. Maybe I can't necessarily compare the release length, but how quickly he got the ball out in his progression to me was better than any other quarterback I watched, maybe besides Cam Ward.
That's fine. I'm talking about specifically when
The
he pulls the
release.
trigger on releasing the. When you've spent your entire NFL fandom watching Aaron Rodgers release the ball, you have a very high standard for what a quick release is, and his is just on slow mo. It's a big problem. It's what Justin Fields deals with. It reminded me of that.
I don't want to say Brandon Whedon, but Brandon Whedon. Let's.
Brandon,
He was like
But
28.
okay, so pretty close. All right, let's move on. I want to emphasize that we have mentioned 5 quarterbacks so far. We've been in this episode 40 minutes now, and somehow Jackson Dart has not been discussed. And where, again, I wanted you to keep these answers short here, but like many people are talking about teams trying to trade back into the end of the first round to go grab him. You guys have basically shoved him to QB 6s on both of your lists. What is the hate for Jackson Dart, and explain your decisions?
So Jackson Dart is my QB3. Right. So did I say Shador was my QB3?
Yeah.
Sorry. It would go, Cam, Jalen, Jackson, Shador would be my top 4. Jackson Dart is I think the classic QB where you turn on the YouTube highlight reel and you go, man, this guy is good. He's got good touch on his deep ball. He's got a live arm. He's got great athleticism and feel as a runner. You watch those tapes and you go, this is a first round quarterback. And then you watch the Ole Miss games on the field, and that offense would just completely stall out way too frequently. And a lot of it was due to his play at quarterback. It's the classic, if you're so good at QB, then why is your QBing not very good? And so for me, he has a lot of the top end skill talent to start in the NFL and be a productive quarterback, but the consistency is really lacking for me when I watch his tape. That's my biggest concern.
For myself, Jackson Dart, yeah, it was like I couldn't just get myself over the hump to loving him. I liked him, but I really he and Will Howard were similar to me in that they had all the tools. They're different styles for sure. Will's a little bigger, a little more lumbering, and Jackson's a little more loose and casual, and they're both athletes in their own right. But they both just seem to take too long getting through their progression. And the way that what kept popping up for me with Dart first was that the receivers kept seeming to wait on the ball a little bit, whether it was the first progression or the first read or the second read. And so, when it's the second read, okay, maybe that's an issue with hanging on the first read too long. When it's the first read and the second read consistently are waiting for the ball too long, it just seems to me that you need to work on your processing speed a little. So you have all the tools there, but we're not drafting you to start this year. We're drafting you to develop. You need at least a year learning our offense, and then we'll see the next year if you can operate it efficiently. Because when you're not getting through those progressions quickly enough and you're not throwing with anticipation, that's when the NFL DBs that weren't in college, even in the SEC, that's when they have an extra step and they are going to jump those passes that you're not throwing with anticipation, that you're waiting on just a half second. I don't want to bring up the pat or anything, but just the whole operation needs to be a little quicker. Again, all quarterbacks do the pat, but with Jackson Dart, the speed of the operation needs to increase.
You mentioned Will Howard before. Obviously coming off of a national championship, the senior transfer to Ohio State. He's going to enter this draft class as well. Kind of some wide varieties of takes on him. Adam, kind of talk me through through Will Howard a minute here, and kind of how you project him, not only going in this draft, but moving forward.
Yeah, so again, similar to Jackson Dart, seems like he knows the offense, he operates the offense, but he doesn't have that processing speed to maximize the efficiency of the offense. Receivers waiting on passes a little bit. So Will Howard, though, he is a different style of quarterback. He's bigger. He's a little more lumbering. His footwork is a little more disciplined than Jackson Dart's. But again, that also kind of worries me that, if he's a little late on throws and he has sloppy footwork, then we just fix that footwork and those throws are going to be zipping out of there. Well, the footwork kind of looks all right already, and the throws are still a little late. So it's a little concerning to me. And again, we need to draft him as a project. He's got all the tools. He's an accurate quarterback, even strong arm and accurate, needs a little more touch, but we need to work on the mental. We need to work on him playing the quarterback position.
I think he has. Go ahead, Yacht.
I mean, if you want to look at the floor, watch the Michigan game. The offense couldn't operate. He was not good in that game.
I watch it weekly.
Yep. And if you want to watch what his ceiling is, watch his college football run. My favorite trait about him is that he gets his best players the ball, which sounds obvious for what a quarterback should do.
Chip Kelly offense.
Right, but so many times quarterbacks seem to avoid throwing to their best players. And Will Howard understood that he had the best receiver in college football in Justin Smith and just threw him the ball, or Emeka Egbuka, right? Or actually, really, all of their
wide receiver,
incredible, right? But he just ran the offense and got them the ball consistently, accurate enough where they could make plays on it. And I think he is like the absolute prototypical backup QB in the NFL. He can come in. If you had to play 4 games, he would win you 2 out of the 4 if he's playing well, but he doesn't have the traits to push as a starter in the league, I think. But a QB like that in round 3 to have the insurance behind, I think is an awesome investment as a GM.
Great backup.
Yeah. Let's do a couple rapid fire questions here as we kind of predict what will happen in this draft here. If I say over under 2.5 quarterbacks drafted in the first round, Eli, what say you? Over, Adam?
Over.
If I move that number to 3.5 QBs in the first round?
Over.
Under.
4 in the first. Okay. I will use the Saints pick at number 9 as the marker. When does Shedeur get drafted? Before or after Saints?
Before the Saints.
Before the Saints. You think someone takes him inside top 8? Adam, afterwards? Okay.
I trust NFL scouting departments to figure this one out.
Again,
the ownership might not.
Normally, I'd say yes, but in the quarterback position, usually that goes out the window.
The Giants literally just sent their entire franchise to go and meet with him.
It's a smoke screen.
We don't have enough time for that, all right? Because I got thoughts. I got thoughts on that, and boy, I don't want them to be true. Let's go over under 6.5 quarterbacks drafted in the first 2 rounds. Do 7 quarterbacks get drafted in the first 2? We've mentioned 7 of them so far today.
Under.
Okay, so you've got 4 in the first, but not more than 3 going in the second there. Okay.
I got 3 and 3.
Quarterbacks. Yeah. The thing about quarterbacks is if they're not starters, then they just don't get drafted. The second round starters right now in the league are Geno, Will Levis, Jalen Hurts, and Derek Carr. Dak is a 4th round pick. Brock Purdy is a 7th round pick. Every other starter in the league was a 1st round pick. And then you look at the history of round 2 quarterbacks, and it is rough.
And we know that Will Levis isn't going to be the starter come week 1 anyways.
So it really is first or bust. It is why once you hit that first round number, it doesn't go much higher historically.
Let's talk about the first round again. We've brought up Jalen Milroe on the show. All 3 of us like him. We all know how freakishly athletic the guy is. We also know how questionable that arm accuracy and consistency can be. He is invited to the Green Bay draft room. He is going to be at the first round of the draft in a suit, sitting there in the draft room with all the other projected first round talent. Normally, the NFL does not want a Will Levis situation for someone to be sitting there and then have to come back in day 2 or not even come back at all. We are shocked. I mean, I was shocked to see that he got the invite here. Does this mean that some team is actively campaigning, has basically told him that he is going to be a first round talent? Eli, does Jalen Milroe go in the first round?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And to who? Give me a bonus pick.
I think the Giants will trade back up to like pick 24, I think, or 23, right where the Packers and the Vikings are going, and go up for Jalen right there.
Okay, Adam.
Jalen to the Steelers.
At
First
21?
round. Yeah.
Okay, so he goes in the first round, and his seat in Green Bay at the draft is warranted. Let's do one more, and I want to give you guys both like a minute or so on this question. Which, if any, QB drafted outside of the top 3 rounds, or you know what, I'll use it in this way. Which QB have we not mentioned? Because we've mentioned quite a few of them that we expect to go in the first 2 to 3 rounds. Which QB that we have not mentioned has the best chance of being relevant in the NFL?
Eli?
I think Riley Leonard has the best chance to be relevant.
He certainly has the best hair in the NFL.
That he does.
He has a chance.
He is a leader. He's going to stick around the league for 12 to 14 years. And when we talk about relevant, I think Mitchell Trubisky like career in terms of a backup, where he's going to start somewhere like 14 to 17 games as a backup in the career. When you take a look at the rest of the players, I think they'll have the longest career out of all of these kind of round 4 to 7 QBs that will go.
Adam?
Yeah, I look at 2 guys who kind of have a reason to be a little pissed off, and Quinn Ewers and Kyle McCord. So if I'm going to pick a pissed off guy, I'm going to pick the one who seems to have a little more physical tools. So I'll go with Kyle McCord.
I was choosing between Ewers and McCord. I think both of them, like you said, slightly disrespected, not only by the general NFL, but also us in this conversation as we've left them to the final seconds. So you know what? We're part of the problem. But I will say, I want to give a quick shout to Dylan Gabriel. I love every single thing about this guy, except for the fact that he's 5'11", and I don't think that number is correct. That is, if that number was 6'2", I think this is a high second-round talent. He makes every throw. He runs an offense beautifully. I've just been incredibly impressed by him, if it weren't for the fact that he is 5'10", with cleats on. So if that weren't the case, he would be on there.
Yeah, for Quinn, I don't have a draftable grade on Quinn Ewers.
Not even a draftable grade on Quinn Ewers. So the disrespect continues on this show, and I look forward to watching Quinn Ewers try and prove us wrong.
That's why we picked them, because it's not the physical, it's the mental that's going to piss these guys off to turn into the next Brady.
I appreciate you trying to do bulletin board material for them as they get ready for Sundays. But that just about does it for today's show. If you enjoyed the show, well, thank you. And make sure you are subscribed wherever you listen to your podcasts so you don't miss an episode in the future. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to rate and review us, as long as your name isn't Quinn Ewers, please, because we want those 5 stars. And while you are at it, be sure to follow Front Office Playbook on X, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch to be informed of all of our live shows, scouting videos, and more. So stay up to date on everything happening around the NFL and its impact on your team. Be sure to check back in soon for a brand new episode and a brand new mock draft coming shortly. And be sure to reach out to us on X to tell us what topics we should tackle next. So until next episode, for Adam, Eli, and myself, stay safe out there. And as always, thanks for listening.